I was speaking to a young man today, and he had asked a question regarding voodoo or witchcraft or Santeria. And the question was, why is it that people that practice the dark arts get better results than people that pray? He said, when you go to people that practice the dark arts, it seems like you get immediate results, but yet when you pray and ask God for help, it appears that your prayers are unheard of. It appears that God does not answer prayer. So I gave him my reasons on why it appears that people get better results going to witch doctors and witches and voodoo priests than they would if you would pray and ask God. And I liken that to the pawn shop. So the idea came in my mind to make this video about the devil's pawn shop. Now, people usually go to a pawn shop out of desperation. They have sentimental values that have no value, but yet when they find themselves in a desperate situation, they need money now for whatever reason. They can't go to a bank or credit union because they may not have the perfect credit score. They may not have the credit. So the only result that they have is either to steal or to sell something that has value to it for less price. So things that are sentimental but have no real monetary values, or things that have value, they sell it for close to nothing because out of desperation they need a few pieces of silver. Well, that's the same way it is with the devil. He gives you things out of desperation. Whereas with God, the just shall live by faith and not by sight. I want to read a couple of scriptures to you. The first scripture is taken from the book of Mark, the 8th chapter, reading the 36th to the 38th verse. And it reads as follows. And I spoke on this in prior videos. But there's a lot of jewels in these scriptures. These scriptures are quite heavy if you take the time out to study, to show yourself approved unto Yah, a workman that needs not be ashamed, but rightly dividing the words of truth. The scripture reads as follows. For what shall it profit a man if he shall gain the whole world and lose his own soul? Or what shall a man give in exchange for his soul? So in order for a man to be willing to give something in exchange for his soul, he finds himself in an extremely desperate situation. It's only out of desperation that this man would even give something in exchange for his soul. And then the 38th verse reads, whosoever therefore shall be ashamed of me and of my words in this adulterous and sinful generation, of him also shall the Son of Man be ashamed when he cometh in the glory of his Father with the holy angels. The next scripture I want to read is taken from the book of Matthew, the 26th chapter, reading the 14th to the 16th verse. And this is a great example of going to the devil's pawn shop. You find yourself in a desperate situation, and many people can relate to this scripture because in many cases people find themselves in this situation. And the scripture reads, starting at the 14th verse of Matthew, the 26th chapter, then one of the 12, called Judas Iscariot, went unto the chief priests, in this modern time, the preachers. And if you're in the Catholic Church, the Catholic priest. The 15th verse says, and said unto them, what will ye give me, if I will deliver him unto you? And they covenanted with him for 30 pieces of silver. So they made a covenant, they made an agreement, a deal, a pact. In many cases, people would say, you sold your soul to the devil. He sold his soul to the devil for 30 pieces of silver. What will you give me? And this is the same thing that people say when they find themselves in a desperate situation, going to the pawn shop, taking that sentimental value that maybe their grandmother or great grandmother owned. It meant a lot to them. It meant a lot to their family because it's a family heirloom, but yet they find themselves in a difficult situation. And they go to the pawn shop and say, what will you give me for this? And because of the fact that they are so desperate, they find themselves taking $20, $40. They may have a drug habit. Give me $40 for it, and you can have it. Well, it must not have meant too much to you. What would a man give in exchange for his soul? The 16th verse says, and from that time he sought opportunity to betray him. From the moment he made that covenant with the devil at the devil's pawn shop, from that point on, he became a demon, seeking an opportunity to betray Christ. And you'd be surprised at the number of people that's in your life that's waiting for an opportunity to betray you because they entered the devil's pawn shop. They made a deal, a pact, a covenant with the devil. The final scripture I want to read is taken from the book of Matthew, the 27th chapter, reading the 1st to the 10th verse. When the morning was come, all the chief priests and elders of the people took counsel against Jesus to put him to death. This is after Judas betrayed Christ and delivered him to the agents of Satan. And when they had bound him, led him away, and delivered him to Pontius Pilate, the governor, then Judas, which had betrayed him, when he saw that he was condemned. Now this right here says a lot. Because you have people that feel that God is so loving, God is so forgiving that in spite of what you do or how you live, God will forgive you. They take grace for granted. And this is a situation when Judas realized that he was condemned. In other words, there was no more hope for him because he made a pact with the devil. He made a deal with the devil. He sold his soul for a few pieces of silver. He went to the devil's pawn shop and asked, what would you give me if I betray your son or your brother? What would you give me if I turn your brother over to you? Now, some of you didn't get that. Go back and study it. Yes, Satan is Yeshua's brother. They're kinfolk. And many of you betray your own kinfolk for a few pieces of silver. Then Judas, when he had betrayed him, when he saw that he was condemned, repented himself. This is a good example. He repented after he realized that he was condemned. He repented and brought again the 30 pieces of silver to the chief priests and elders, saying, I have sinned. Now, this sounds familiar because this is what a lot of churches tell people they have to do to be forgiven. Lord, I have sinned. Remember that sinner's prayer? But yet their hearts are not right. They've already been condemned in themselves, and they are fully aware that they are condemned. Saying, I have sinned in that I have betrayed an innocent blood. And they said, what is that to us? See thou to it. So they became religious. They said to him, what does that have to do with us? You do you. We ain't got nothing to do with that. The 5th verse says, and he cast down the pieces of silver in the temple and departed and went and hanged himself. Judas went to the extreme. After he realized he was condemned, he accomplished the deal, the covenant that he made at the devil's pawn shop. And he hanged himself. The 6th verse says, and the chief priests took the silver pieces and said, it is not lawful for to put them into the treasury, because it is the price of blood. In other words, this is blood money, so it can't go with the righteous money, the holy money. This is a holy church, a sanctuary, and that's what a lot of preachers do today. They do wicked, or they put others up to do wicked for them, or convince others to do wicked, and then try to play that sanctimonious role. They try to play that they're holy and righteous and that God forgives them only. But you going to hell. And I'm sure many of you are familiar with that type of spirit. So the 6th verse says, and the chief priest took the silver pieces and said, it is not lawful to put them into the treasury, because it is the price of blood. And they took counsel and brought with them the potter's field to bury strangers in. So Judas wasn't even worthy to be buried amongst them. They buried him in the potter's field, a place where they bury strangers, outsiders. But yet Judas did biddings for them. And we find that black folks do the same thing for the Democrat Party today and get nothing out of it. So many of you are betraying your own brothers and sisters in the name of politics, in the name of the Democrat Party, but I didn't mean to go there. The 8th verse says, wherefore the field was called the field of blood unto this day. The 9th verse says, then was fulfilled that which was spoken by Jeremy the prophet, saying, and they took the 30 pieces of silver, the price of him that was valued. So Judas was only valued at the price of 30 pieces of silver at the devil's pawn shop. I'm going to read that again because you missed that. This is heavy. And they took the 30 pieces of silver, the price of him that was valued, whom they of the children of Israel did value, and gave them for the potter's field, as the Lord appointed me. So Judas' value to them was only worth 30 pieces of silver. That was all his soul was worth. What would a man give in exchange for his soul? Judas received 30 pieces of silver, which he didn't even have the opportunity to enjoy. But he gave it up for 30 pieces of silver just to betray Christ, the Son of the living Yah. So be careful going to the devil's pawn shop, because you just might get what you really don't want. What does it profit a man to gain the world and lose his soul? Or what would you give in exchange for your soul? And stop always trying to rely on grace, because grace cannot save you for your wicked deeds. I'll repeat that. Grace cannot save you from your wicked deeds. You have to reap what you sow. So feedback, tell me what you think. Till next time, I'm Fearless.